November 1942. The deserts of North Africa. A German mechanized column advances through the sand. Their vehicles are sophisticated, engineered to perfection. Every component precisely designed according to German manufacturing standards. Then they encounter something that seems impossible. An American vehicle abandoned in the sand. 4 wheels, an open frame, almost absurdly simple. The German engineers examine it with confusion mixed with contempt. This can't be a military vehicle. It's too basic, too crude, too simple. But when they try to start it, the engine roars to life immediately. When they test it in the sand, it performs flawlessly. When they examine the components, they find something that challenges every principle of German engineering. This vehicle that looks like a toy outperforms their carefully engineered machines in almost every practical way. This is the story of the Jeep, and how German engineers learned that sometimes simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
German engineers were stunned by the Jeep's simplicity after examining captured vehicles in North Africa. This is not a story about weapons or firepower. This is a story about engineering philosophy, about 2 completely different approaches to solving the same problem. The Germans believed in precision, in complexity, in engineering excellence achieved through sophisticated design. The Americans, facing a different set of constraints, chose a radical alternative. Strip everything down to the absolute essentials. Make it simple, make it reliable, make it maintainable by anyone with basic tools. The result was a vehicle that German engineers initially dismissed as primitive. But after examining captured examples, those same engineers were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Americans had solved problems that German engineering had overcomplicated. To understand why the Jeep stunned German engineers, we need to understand what military vehicles looked like in 1940, and why the American approach was so revolutionary. German military vehicle design in 1940 reflected a specific engineering philosophy that had dominated European manufacturing: precision engineering. Every component manufactured to exact specifications. Tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. Quality achieved through complexity and precision. The Kübelwagen, Germany's primary light utility vehicle, embodied this philosophy perfectly. It was based on the Volkswagen Beetle design. Ferdinand Porsche had engineered it with typical German attention to detail. The engine was air-cooled, which was innovative, but it required precise manufacturing. The transmission was sophisticated with carefully engineered gearing. The suspension used torsion bars and advanced design for the time. The result was a vehicle that performed well when properly maintained. But here was the problem. It required proper maintenance, specialized tools, trained mechanics, precise replacement parts. In the controlled environment of Germany, this wasn't a problem. German logistics could support sophisticated maintenance. German factories could produce precision parts. German mechanics were trained to exacting standards. But in North Africa, these advantages disappeared. The desert was harsh. Sand infiltrated everything. Temperatures fluctuated wildly. Parts wore faster than anticipated. And maintaining precision-engineered vehicles became increasingly difficult. German mechanics found themselves struggling to keep vehicles operational. Replacement parts took weeks to arrive. Specialized tools were in short supply. The very precision that made German vehicles excellent in theory made them fragile in practice. Meanwhile, reports began filtering back from the front lines. American forces had a vehicle that seemed to ignore these problems. A vehicle that soldiers could repair with basic tools. That ran despite abuse, that performed in conditions that would disable German vehicles. German commanders initially dismissed these reports. American vehicles were known to be inferior, crude, mass-produced without the precision of German engineering. But then, in November 1942, German forces captured several intact American Jeeps. And German engineers got their first chance to examine this mysterious vehicle up close. The story of the Jeep begins not with brilliant engineering, but with desperation. In 1940, the United States Army faced a crisis. War was coming. Everyone knew it, but the American military was unprepared. The Army had relied on motorcycles and modified civilian vehicles for light transport. Neither was adequate for modern mechanized warfare. The Army needed a new vehicle. Something light, something fast, something that could go anywhere. But here was the constraint that would define everything that followed. They needed it immediately, and they needed tens of thousands of them. The Army issued a specification in June 1940. The requirements seemed almost impossible. Weight limit, 1,300 pounds. That's extraordinarily light for a four-wheeled vehicle. Payload capacity, 600 pounds. That's 3 soldiers plus equipment. Four-wheel drive, essential for off-road performance. Foldable windshield, for shipping and tactical concealment. Maximum height, 40 inches. Low profile for concealment. And here's the requirement that changed everything. Deliverable in 49 days. Not 49 weeks, 49 days. 3 American companies competed for the contract: Willys Overland, Ford, and American Bantam. Each had different approaches, but all faced the same brutal constraint. You can't design a sophisticated vehicle in 49 days. You can barely design a simple vehicle in 49 days. The winning approach, developed primarily by Willys but incorporating ideas from all 3 companies, was revolutionary in its simplicity. Strip away everything unnecessary. Use existing, proven components wherever possible. Prioritize reliability over sophistication. Make it simple enough that any mechanic could repair it. Make it tough enough to survive abuse. The result was a vehicle that German engineers initially dismissed as primitive. But after examining captured examples, those same engineers were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Americans had solved problems that German engineering had overcomplicated. When American forces landed in North Africa in November 1942 as part of Operation Torch, they brought thousands of Jeeps with them. German forces had been fighting in North Africa for nearly 2 years. They understood desert warfare. They knew the challenges: extreme heat during the day, freezing cold at night, sand that infiltrated every mechanical component, vast distances that put enormous strain on vehicles and logistics. German vehicles had adapted, sort of. The Kübelwagen performed reasonably well, but it required constant maintenance. Oil changes were more frequent in the desert heat. Air filters clogged constantly with fine sand. Engine cooling was problematic in extreme temperatures. Then the Americans arrived, with their Jeeps. German reconnaissance units began reporting something unusual. The Americans were using a small, open vehicle that seemed to operate everywhere: in deep sand where German vehicles bogged down, across rocky terrain that would damage German suspensions, through wadis and dried riverbeds. The vehicle's simplicity made it almost unstoppable. German intelligence officers were skeptical. Surely these reports were exaggerated. The Americans were new to desert warfare. Their equipment couldn't possibly outperform German vehicles. Then, in early December 1942, a German patrol captured an intact Jeep near Taborba in Tunisia. The vehicle had been abandoned by retreating American forces. It was damaged, but not destroyed. German engineers examined it with great interest and with growing surprise. The vehicle's design violated nearly every principle of German automotive engineering. The suspension was primitive by German standards, just leaf springs, no sophistication. The body was stamped steel, no complex curves, no precision body panel gaps. Everything was designed for mass production, not precision. The engine was simple, a flathead four-cylinder design that German engineers considered outdated. The electrical system was basic. The instruments were minimal. But when German mechanics got the Jeep running, they discovered something remarkable. It worked. And it worked well. The simple suspension that looked primitive actually performed brilliantly in rough terrain. The leaf springs absorbed impacts that would damage more sophisticated systems. The simple engine that looked outdated was actually extremely reliable. Fewer moving parts meant fewer points of failure. The stamped steel body that lacked precision was actually incredibly durable. It could be dented, scratched, even partially crushed and still function. The minimal electrical system meant there was almost nothing to go wrong. One German engineer, in a report that was later captured by Allied forces, wrote something that captured the cognitive dissonance they were experiencing. This vehicle represents a complete rejection of engineering principles we consider fundamental. Yet it performs its mission more effectively than vehicles that adhere to those principles. We must conclude that either our principles are incomplete or the Americans have discovered something we do not understand. That something was elegance through simplicity. German engineers conducted extensive testing on captured Jeeps throughout 1943. They documented everything, every component, every design choice, every performance characteristic. Their reports, many of which survived the war, reveal a fascinating evolution in their thinking. Initial assessment, December 1942. The vehicle is crudely built with minimal sophistication. Body panels show poor fit and finish. Engine is outdated design. Suspension is primitive. Overall assessment, inferior to German equivalents. But as testing continued, that assessment began to change. Engine analysis. The Willys L134 engine produces only 60 horsepower. This is inadequate by German standards. However, the engine's simplicity provides unexpected benefits. The flathead design has no overhead valves. This seems primitive, but it makes the engine extremely compact, easy to access, and almost impossible to damage through rough handling. The four-cylinder configuration is simple but effective. Parts are interchangeable. Any mechanic can perform repairs. The compression ratio is low, allowing it to run on poor quality fuel. This would be unacceptable in a German vehicle, but in combat conditions, it provides enormous operational flexibility. Transmission analysis. The 3-speed manual transmission is basic, but it includes a 2-speed transfer case that provides excellent gearing options. Low range allows the vehicle to climb obstacles we thought impossible for a vehicle this light. High range provides adequate road speed. The system is simple enough that field repairs are possible. This is a significant advantage over more sophisticated German transmissions that require factory-level service. Suspension analysis. The leaf spring suspension front and rear seems archaic. German vehicles use more advanced torsion bar or independent suspension systems. However, in extended desert testing, we discover that the simple leaf springs have significant advantages. They are extremely durable. They can be damaged and still function. They're easy to repair or replace in field conditions. They provide adequate ride quality while being nearly indestructible. The ground clearance of 8.75 inches is superior to our Kugelwagen. The simple suspension articulates well over rough terrain. In rough terrain tests, the Jeep consistently outperformed our vehicles. Durability analysis. We subjected a captured Jeep to tests designed to induce failure. We drove it through deep sand until we expected the engine to overheat. It did not. We drove it at maximum speed over rough terrain until we expected suspension failure. It did not fail. We removed the air filter and ran the engine to simulate extreme sand infiltration. The engine continued to run. We drained the oil to simulate maintenance failure. The engine ran for several minutes before seizing. After cooling and adding oil, the engine restarted. This level of durability is extraordinary. Maintenance analysis. This is perhaps the most significant finding. The Jeep can be maintained with minimal tools. We performed a complete engine teardown and rebuild using only basic hand tools. This took 3 hours with 2 mechanics. A comparable repair on a Kugelwagen requires specialized tools and takes 8 to 10 hours. The interchangeability of parts is remarkable. Components from different Jeeps are completely interchangeable. This is achieved through loose tolerances.
which we would normally consider a deficiency, but in practice, it means that field repairs can use parts from any source. Soldiers with basic mechanical knowledge can perform most repairs. This reduces dependence on specialized mechanics and complex supply chains.
As German engineers studied the Jeep, they began to understand that its design had profound tactical implications. The Americans hadn't just built a vehicle, they had built a vehicle that enabled different tactical approaches. German military doctrine relied on centralized logistics and maintenance. Vehicles were maintained by specialized personnel. Parts were supplied through organized channels. This worked well when supply lines were secure and organized, but in North Africa, supply lines were constantly disrupted. Distance, enemy action, the chaos of mobile warfare. The Jeep's design seemed almost purpose-built for chaotic conditions. Individual units could maintain their own vehicles. Soldiers could perform field repairs. Parts could be scavenged from damaged vehicles. This created enormous operational flexibility. German after-action reports began noting this difference. American forces demonstrate unusual mobility. Their light vehicles operate far from established supply lines. They appear capable of sustained operations with minimal logistical support. This is partly due to the extreme simplicity and durability of their primary transport vehicle. German commanders also noted something else. The Jeep enabled different tactical approaches. Its small size and maneuverability made it excellent for reconnaissance. Its reliability meant reconnaissance units could operate for extended periods. Its simplicity meant they could repair battle damage and continue operations. German reconnaissance units, by comparison, required more support, more fuel, more spare parts, more specialized maintenance. This limited their operational range and flexibility. The Jeep also enabled rapid deployment of infantry. American forces would use Jeeps to transport soldiers quickly across the battlefield. The open design allowed rapid mounting and dismounting. Soldiers could fire weapons from the moving vehicle. This created a level of tactical mobility that German forces found difficult to counter. Perhaps most significantly, the Jeep's design enabled improvisation. American forces modified Jeeps extensively. They mounted machine guns. They added armor plates. They converted them into ambulances. They used them as communications vehicles. They even mounted anti-tank weapons on them. The simple design made modification easy. The durable construction meant modifications didn't compromise the vehicle's basic reliability. German vehicles, precisely engineered for specific roles, were much harder to modify. The tolerances were too tight, the designs too integrated. Attempting field modifications often compromised the vehicle's functionality. German engineers summarized these tactical implications in a report dated August 1943. The American Jeep represents a different philosophy of military vehicle design. German vehicles are engineered for optimal performance within specified parameters. The Jeep is engineered for acceptable performance across the widest possible range of conditions. German vehicles achieve excellence through precision. The Jeep achieves adequacy through simplicity. In combat conditions, adequacy that can be maintained is superior to excellence that cannot. This was a profound admission. By mid-1943, German military leadership recognized that the Jeep represented a significant tactical advantage for Allied forces. They ordered German automotive manufacturers to study the concept and develop a German equivalent. This project revealed just how different the German and American engineering philosophies were, and how difficult it is to deliberately design for simplicity when your entire engineering culture prioritizes precision. The project was assigned to several manufacturers. Volkswagen, Porsche, even Mercedes-Benz examined the problem. Their task was clear: create a vehicle with Jeep-like capabilities. Simple, reliable, easy to maintain. But here's where the cultural differences became apparent. German engineers couldn't help themselves. They kept adding sophistication. One design included an advanced independent suspension system. The engineers argued it would improve handling, but it also added complexity and weight. Another design featured a more powerful engine with overhead valves, better performance, but less reliable and harder to maintain. Multiple designs included precision-manufactured components, tighter tolerances, better fit and finish, all the things German engineering valued. But all the things that made the Jeep's simplicity work were lost. By late 1943, several German prototype vehicles had been built. They were tested against captured Jeeps. The results were telling. The German prototypes performed better on some metrics: faster top speed, better handling on roads, more comfortable ride. But on the metrics that mattered in combat, the Jeep won. The German prototypes broke down more frequently. They required more maintenance. They needed specialized tools for repairs. They were more complex to operate. Field testing was particularly revealing. When German prototypes were given to frontline units for evaluation, the feedback was unanimous. These vehicles are improvements over the Kübelwagen, but they are not as good as the Jeep. The soldiers wanted something simpler, more reliable, easier to maintain. One test report stated bluntly, "Soldiers prefer captured American Jeeps to our prototype vehicles. This is not due to performance deficiencies in our designs. It is because the American vehicle is simple enough that any soldier can maintain it. Our vehicles require mechanics." The project ultimately failed, not because German engineers couldn't design a Jeep equivalent, but because they couldn't design with the simplicity the Jeep embodied. Their engineering culture worked against them. Every instinct told them to add sophistication, to improve precision, to optimize performance. But the Jeep's genius was in what it left out, not what it included. One German engineer, in a post-war interview, reflected on this failure. "We understood the Jeep's principles intellectually, but we could not implement them. Our training, our culture, our entire approach to engineering fought against that level of simplicity. We saw simplicity as a deficiency to be corrected. The Americans saw it as a feature to be preserved." This difference in philosophy defeated us more surely than their industrial capacity. By 1944, the Jeep's reputation had spread throughout the German military. It was no longer just engineers who understood its significance. Frontline soldiers, maintenance crews, and commanders all recognized that the Americans had created something special. German soldiers captured by Allied forces often commented on the Jeep. Many admitted they preferred it to German vehicles. This wasn't national disloyalty. It was practical recognition of a superior tool. German maintenance personnel were particularly vocal. They understood better than anyone how much easier American logistics were. One German mechanic, interviewed after being captured in France in 1944, said something that captured this reality. "An American company can maintain their vehicles with 2 mechanics and a box of basic tools. A German company needs 6 specialized mechanics and a workshop full of equipment. When things are organized, the German approach works. When things are chaotic, as they always are in combat, the American approach is far superior." The Jeep also had psychological impact. German soldiers saw American forces operating with apparent ease, moving quickly, responding rapidly to changing situations, maintaining operations despite disrupted supply lines. This created an impression of American logistical superiority that went beyond the reality. Yes, American industry produced more vehicles, but it wasn't just quantity. The quality of design, specifically the simplicity that enabled operational flexibility, made American forces seem more capable than their numbers alone would suggest. German commanders noted this in reports. American forces demonstrate mobility and flexibility that exceeds what their numerical strength would suggest. Much of this advantage derives from the extreme reliability and simplicity of their transport vehicles. The Soviet Union also took notice.
Soviet engineers examined captured Jeeps and were impressed. After the war, the Soviet GAZ-67 and later GAZ-69 showed clear influence from Jeep design principles: simple, robust, easy to maintain. The British, who received thousands of Jeeps through Lend-Lease, quickly came to depend on them. British forces called them the most useful weapon of the war in some reports, not because of firepower, but because of the operational flexibility they enabled. Even after the war, many nations attempted to copy the Jeep. Some succeeded. Others, like Germany, found that copying the form was easier than copying the philosophy. The Jeep's influence extended beyond military applications. The Jeep CJ series, introduced after the war, became the template for sport utility vehicles worldwide. Land Rover, Toyota Land Cruiser, countless other vehicles trace their lineage directly to the military Jeep. All inherited the same basic principles: simple, durable, go-anywhere capability. The Jeep proved that sometimes